This year, we were gifted with two high-profile Souls-like games, Lies of P and Lords of the Fallen. Of these new entries, Lies of P really grabbed me, while Lords of the Fallen didn't quite measure up, and I think it has to do with the fundamental core of what makes a good Souls-like, which is being tough but fair. As I mentioned in my Elden Ring video, Souls-likes are named after the Dark Souls series, which is primarily known for just being super challenging. They really are an acquired taste, as without a means to manually adjust the difficulty, you really have to bring your skills up to its unflinching level. What this does mean, however, is that the victories you do achieve are some of the most rewarding gaming has to offer. It wouldn't be much of a stretch to say that Lies of P may have just sold me on the entire Souls-like genre. Sure, I liked Sekiro and Elden Ring, but there was something about Lies of P that just got its hooks in me. Honestly, I think it might be some kind of toxic love born from some sort of psychological trauma, because this game is crazy hard. As I said, hard is the name of the game for Souls-likes, but this was on another level. I was screaming in frustration at some of the insane boss fights. This stupid one alone took me 2 separate days of trying and watching videos to finally get it, but when I did get it, damn, it felt good. The reason that P is so hard,
phrasing, boom.
The reason that Lies of P is so hard when compared to other Souls-like games is because you have to play it its way. The levels are linear, so you can't skip any bosses and come back later. Builds are pretty much limited to melee, and the dodge ability, the go-to defense in these games, is pretty much garbage. You can use a summon spirit to help you in certain boss fights, but it's not available for all of them, so at some point you're gonna be out of luck. This leaves you with blocking, which also isn't great because you'll still take a little damage. So in order to succeed, you need to parry. You need to time your blocks perfectly when the enemy is about to land a blow. And when I say perfectly, I mean perfectly, because the game is very strict in terms of what it will count. Because of this, Lies of P is almost like a rhythm game, more than a fighting one. You have to learn the beat at which the bosses attack and react accordingly, but when you do master the timing, you feel like you've earned your victories through skill, not just through panicked dodging and luck. Despite this extreme difficulty, P never feels unfair. Yes, P asks a lot of you, and yes, some bosses have stupidly fast attacks, but every loss felt like it was my fault. My fault for being too aggressive with my attacks, or not paying attention to my defense. I mean, I still complained and thought it was bullshit, but I knew I could overcome it eventually, so I pressed on. At no point did I feel cheated by the core mechanics of the game. The same cannot be said for Lords of the Fallen. On the surface, Lords has all the pieces of a faithful Souls-like. The grim setting, the lack of colors, the weird NPCs, the high difficulty, but it's missing a few key elements that cause me to tire of it. It even has stuff that Lies of P doesn't, with varied build options between melee, ranged, and magic. There's even this ghost world layered on top of the normal one that allows for some interesting traversal puzzles. It's almost hard to describe what's missing in this game, but while playing it, it just doesn't feel good. Like trying to cut something with a dull knife or running in hiking boots. Your character controls a little awkwardly as they run with this unnatural quickness that doesn't quite suit their heavy appearance. Attacks feel floaty as you sort of cut through enemies without much impact behind any of your strikes. The same is also true of parrying attacks. Unlike Lies of P, where there's this flash and shower of sparks to mark a big successful parry, here you just get a little blue puff, which is a little underwhelming. While the feeling of a game's mechanics is a little superficial, the biggest shortcoming of Lords is that it just doesn't feel fair. A lot of deaths had me rolling my eyes or grinding my teeth as it felt like I was fighting the controls as much as the monsters. A massive reason for this is the terrible use of enemy lock-on, which always seems to target the wrong enemy. This, paired with probably the worst camera I've ever seen, causes a lot of headaches. Whether it's from a failure to lock onto an enemy, causing you to suddenly turn 180 degrees, or because you got pushed too close to a wall, so now it's freaking out and you're fighting blind, the camera often lets you down. In these difficult boss battles, being able to focus on the enemy is obviously critical, so when the camera is the reason you get killed half of the time, that's hardly fair. Lords of the Fallen also has some very annoying mechanics that compound this feeling of not being fair. A monster hiding around a corner ready to stab you, that's pretty par for the course for these games. But having loot on the ground that is an instant death and almost indistinguishable from any other loot, that's kind of cheap. Or sometimes having an attack that works one time but doesn't at other times without any reason as to why. I found that the dodges also were hit and miss in terms of what was considered in range and out of range. Lords also has the annoying mechanic of supposed to lose fights, which I honestly can't stand in basically any game, especially one where you're already dying so much. But having it appear in a game like this more than once feels like it's mocking you and really giving you an extra middle finger. Both of these games have fantastic aesthetics, with lore-rich worlds that leave it up to you to piece it all together through careful exploration. Both have some pretty epic-looking bosses and fun gear for you to collect. While some shade was definitely thrown towards Lords of the Fallen, it's definitely not a failure of a game. It just has the misfortune of earning second place in my heart due to a few small missteps in the shadow of a game that absolutely nailed it. Being tough but fair is what makes a good Soulslike. And what makes a game fair is having players fight bosses and not game mechanics. It's fantastic to see games like Lies of P and Lords of the Fallen take a crack at the Elden Ring crown, and I hope it brings us even better Souls-likes in the future. But for now, I've got to get back to yet another playthrough of Lies of P. Thanks for letting me talk gaming.